is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 786. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada, it's Paul Cheon. Paul, what's up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I could be doing a little bit better had this last weekend gone better with the Arena Open.
Oh, we got to do that too. Yes.
At least I made the second day this time, okay?
Congrats, Paul. Congrats.
Yes. I did not go 0 for 16, but we might have a friend who did something similar. We now apparently call it pulling a Cheon.
That's right. We'll talk about that in a minute. I have a story too, but it's much shorter, unfortunately. This episode, we're going to be doing our Q&A episode for, we'll call it the Foundation's Pioneer Masters cycle, where we answer Patreon questions. So questions from our patrons directly. And we've got a good chunk of them here to go through today. These episodes are really fun. They're a bit of a break from our normal routine on the show, and they give us a chance, depending on what our patrons ask us, we'll see how it goes, to talk about a variety of topics, not just Magic, and that's always fun as well. Before we get into that, we want to say thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. If you are a Patreon supporter of ours, you get access to this thread. Basically, you can ask whatever question you want. We really do open it up for these shows. You know, each time I'll put in there that you can ask us about Magic, but you can ask us about anything you want. Seriously, you know, if it, you know, crosses some line or whatever, at some point we'd have to say no. But generally speaking, like, we're pretty willing to talk about whatever real life stuff, you know, Magic stuff, anything. And that's what we've got here today. And again, the way to do that is to support us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources. Thanks to everybody who does so. We're also supported by Ultimate Guard. They make the best stuff, period. I remember when they first came out, and it was like, what is this? Because the deck box and the sleeves that they came out with were so good, and they were so much better than the like thin plastic kind of junkers that we were all used to carrying around, that it was like, wow, like this feels like it's, you know, a totally different product. It's still a deck box. It's just designed to hold your cards. Like, what's the big deal? But, you know, they would give away these plastic ones at pre-releases and stuff that had some Magic stuff on it. And you'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'll just throw my cards in here. But after getting your hands on an Ultimate Guard deck box or sleeves, you're not going to want to go back. They protect your cards, very valuable cards in many cases. They look cool. They feel really nice in your hands, and they're really, really well designed. And that's something that I really appreciate. And they have a full line of products. You can check it out at ultimateguard.com, and you can pick them up at your favorite online retailer or your local game store. Thanks, Ultimate Guard. We do appreciate it. Great call, Paul. Before we jump into our questions, we did have an Arena Open on the weekend. I'll start with mine, and this might explain why I forgot to do the overview, but I had a very busy day and only got a chance to do 2 runs. I actually got quite lucky. The first deck was a red-white deck that was good. Like, it was solid. But I fell quite short. I only made it to 4 wins with that one. Probably just pilot error or just not being used to playing that deck or something. Anyway, but then I had to do some stuff, and then I got home kind of late, and I'm like, all right, I get to take one more shot. You know, it's like midnight. I'm like, all right, let's do this. So I opened it up, and I got another good deck. And, you know, you can't really ask for much more than that, right? There's so many just terrible pools that you open where you're just like, this is unplayable. This one was actually pretty good. And I made it all the way to 6-2. So I had my big decider game, and I got rocked in the decider. My opponent had one of those greedy mana bases, but it worked. At least this game it did. They played Farika, and then the God, and then the next turn they played the Gideon Ally of Zendikar, the 2 white planeswalker, and I'm like, oh, okay, and I was not able to recover. That's actually a nice combo too, as it turns out. So yeah, I didn't quite make it. I technically could have jumped into another 1 or maybe even 2 if I was gonna like Iron Man it, which I've done before, you know, on the back end of 11 tries or whatever, where you're just like, I'm going back in. But I decided that I was going to be at least somewhat resembling an adult this time, and I did not jump back in, because the problem is, of course, that when you do that, even if you do qualify, you have to get back up at like 7. So if it's 2:30 or 3 by the time you go to bed, and then you have to wake up at 7 something, you're looking at 4 to 5 hours of sleep, which is like, that's pretty rough. And then if you don't do well, like your whole Sunday is like pretty messed up if you got 4 hours of sleep and all that. So I decided, you know what, I'm good. I will tell you, if it was Foundations, I probably would have jammed. I maybe even would have like moved some of my plans around if I could. But Pioneer Masters, I was like, I'll take a shot. Like, it's okay. Pioneer Masters is fine. Not my favorite, but not bad. But I just was like, okay, I took my 2 shots and I didn't make it. Normally I prioritize it, but yeah, I didn't this time. How did it go for you? Did you Chi-on it up or?
Well, so my first deck was, I didn't think it was bad. I had good mana fixing. I had some Pilgrim's Eyes and Evolving Wilds, so kind of the world was my oyster. So, and then I had a Keranos, God of Storms, and so I thought certainly there was power there, and I immediately O3'd. And I was like, wow. Man, is it going to be another one? Because I've been playtesting a decent amount of Pioneer Masters, particularly the week leading into the event. I even streamed a couple times just to get the practice in. And I was like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to fire off another one and see what happens. And then I opened the worst sealed pool possibly of all time, or one of the worst pools I've ever opened. I mean, I was racking my brain trying to figure out there was just no 2-color combination with enough playables. Like I just didn't have 23 cards I would be happy playing with in any of my sealed combinations. Oh, boy. And ultimately I landed on this Dimir Tempo deck that had, and Dimir is usually controlling, right? And I had Cloudfin Raptors and I had a Biden of Thassa, but I mean, I was 3 or 4 cards short of an actual deck, and I had to play your favorite card of the format, Marshall.
What'd you play?
I had to play the Returned Centaur in my deck. Yeah, that's right.
Dimir Tempo Returned Centaur deck?
Yeah, it was. I had some graveyard stuff, and I had a Gurmag Angler, and I was like, I guess if I target myself with this Centaur, I can delve and get some stuff. And then I also played a card. I don't even exactly know what the card does. It's Rescue from the Underworld.
Oh, yeah. And, I have to read that every time.
Yeah, every time. So I played one of those because I'm like, well, I'm playing Return Centaur in my deck. Anyways, it was one of the worst decks ever. And after I submitted it, I remember just walking over, just before I started recording, I was thinking, should I just do a different sealed? Like, am I just going to waste my time here? And I said, you know what? Screw it. Like, let's just play a couple games and just see what happens. And we managed to make day 2.
No way.
It was insane. The deck was so bad. It was a 3 out of 10. Like if you rate the cards, it was a 3 out of 10 deck. We had to use every single little bit of, just savvy, just tech. But I had to use Biden of Thassa defensively, right, to get them to attack into me. I had to do all kinds of little things to be able to win. So I was really proud of making day 2 with that deck because it was really, really bad. But then day 2, I drafted what was looking like it was going to be an okay Is It Tempo deck. That was my start. But pack 1 was really tough. Pick 1, I had nothing that I was happy first picking. Pack 2, I had nothing I was happy second picking. And I was just kind of taking blue and red cards and hoping to figure out where I needed to be. And then in pack 2, I did have an Ardenvale Tactician. And in pack 2, I get past a Dictate of Heliod.
Okay.
And I'm kind of blue-red. I got a late Frostborn Weeder tabled out of the pack in pack 1, so I thought maybe I should be blue-red. I did have a Tactician, though, so I made the decision. The Dictate is so strong, and I have a bunch of blue cards. I know white didn't feel especially open, but maybe I can just make this work because I know white's going to be open in pack 2, and the Dictate is so strong, maybe it can just carry me to where I need to go because my red didn't seem super open either. And so I made that decision and made the hard pivot into blue-white. And then I got 0 white cards, literally 0. Really? Sometimes, there are leftover white cards you get.
You got actual 0.
I got actually nothing.
Wow.
In pack 3, I did get a Thunderclap, Wyvern and a Liev Sky Knight, but that's because the person passing to me wasn't in Azorius, but they were likely in some other white combination, and I got nothing. And my deck ended up fine. I actually was 2-0. And then I lost 2 in a row.
Oh,
and so
man.
It was a little unfortunate. And then I looked back on the draft, and if I had to do it again, I think possibly if I not taken the Dictate and just continued going down blue-red, I would have had a really nice blue-red tempo shell with 4 Rimrock Knights. I had a couple of Illusory Angels, which isn't necessarily the best card, but it's really, really good in blue-red because red has a ton of good 1-mana plays.
Yeah.
Well, Rimrock Knight's one of the best ways to enable it, right? Because you can pump your creature and then you can still play the Illusory Knight. Whereas when I was playing the Azorius deck, the Illusory Angel I wasn't able to turn it on all the time because it's not the easiest thing to do. But in blue-red, you have Dragon Mantle. You just have a ton of 1-drops. So I feel like the blue-red deck would have worked out a lot better, and that would have put me in a better situation. But I took a risk, and it didn't pay off, and I ended up going 2-2.
I'm curious. Do you think where was the wiggle room for you to take what you could take the Dictate, but then still be blue-red?
Yeah, so that's the tough part, right? Because once you take the Dictate, let's say the next pack, there's a Hero of Erois,
right,
and a Witch's Mark.
Oh,
I'm just taking the hero, right?
You're taking the hero, yeah.
And so every time you see those picks where maybe there's a marginally better red card or something that's on the same level, you just keep taking the white card instead. Let's say you don't see any blue cards. All of a sudden, you just end up with a bunch of blue and white cards. And then by the time you go to pack 3, and then you start seeing some wild slashes in pack 4, at that point, it's too late. And so that's kind of what ended up happening. Where in pack 2, I got a Hero of Erois, then I got another Hero of Erois, and then I don't know, it's possible I got a Triplicate Spirit, something along those lines. And then at that point, it's just I'm kind of hard committed. And the issue was just pack 3 where I just didn't get anything. And so my deck didn't quite end up on I was playing Nimbus Naiads and just a bunch of filler level cards that I'm not the happiest playing. And had a couple of those cards just been another 2-drop or whatever, or maybe another Gust of Wind, something along those lines, I think I could have done. My deck was still fine, by the way. I mean, I won my first 2 matches, and it got to a rubber match, right? It was the last match to win, and my opponent just had a better draw. The worst part about it, though, is my opponent was playing Skylasher in the last round. I'm playing Blue-White Flyers. And my opponent just had Skylasher all 3 games, which is just a 2/2 flash. I have triple Cloudfin Raptor in my deck, and I'm just like, they leave up 2 mana, and I just go, well,
it into a 1/2.
Well, am I just dead here? Is this what's happening?
That sucks. There are a few randomly targeted cards like that in this, especially in this last version, that are just brutal, and that's definitely one of them. Oh man, can people watch the Dimir, the sealed deck, get there?
Yeah. All that stuff is on the YouTubes. I didn't post the 03. I just didn't think anybody would enjoy watching that one. But I did post the Dimir one. That was my second attempt. So that's gonna be on my YouTube channel along with the unfortunate draft as well afterwards.
Okay, there's a link in the description to Paul's YouTube. I always like to talk about it because I just think it's such a great resource for limited players, and you can see in this case, a good example of a sealed deck that, doesn't fit the criteria of a deck that you'd like to open, it's a pool that you'd like to open. And I think we've all had that experience, especially during the arena opens, where you open up your pool and you feel defeated almost right away. Like you're just like, God, is this even worth the time? Am I gonna, this is just so brutal. Because I looked at my rares and they just stink. I got 4 lands. I got 1 playable rare that's just okay. And you're just like, God, this is going to be painful. But, if there's one thing to learn from sealed is that you really don't know until you get your build together. You can absolutely build a cohesive game plan even without the bombs. It's hard. I'm not going to lie to you. It is hard. Those are major movers on your win rate. They just are. But, especially in sets that have good removal, that is mitigated at least somewhat, where most people will play most of their removal. And if you show up with a bomb, it's not unlikely that they kill it. So unless it's like a mega bomb where even if they kill it, you're way ahead, you could still be okay. But it does prove itself out to be scrappy. It really does. You can learn a lot from doing it. And anyway, so you can check out Paul's video there. Let's get into the questions, Paul. Our first one comes from Virginia, who says, are any of you going to Magic in the Redwoods in March? I don't know what that is.
Magic in the Redwoods? So
it sounds like some NorCal.
Is that Northern California? Yeah. Is that what we're talking about? Are we playing Magic in a cabin? I don't know.
Here it is.
I don't actually know what
I'm going to look at Magic in the Redwoods. Humboldt County's premier Magic the Gathering event in Arcata, California. It's in March. It's a 3-day convention.
Oh, I see. There was a time when I lived in San Jose. So when I lived in San Jose, I'd probably consider going over there. But right now, I just don't really travel to events very often, because I'm just not really a competitive player anymore. So the only events that I really travel to are the Pro Tours, of course, right, for commentary reasons. And that's basically it. There is one event, though, Marshall, this year that I'm considering going to and possibly playing in. And that is, I believe, the Showdown event, the new GPs. There's one in Denver. In Denver. So Luis lives in Denver, and it's limited. So I haven't been doing coverage for the other events, but that one, a lot of it was just a time necessary to prepare for these events, right? They're constructed events, and oftentimes they're formats I don't play. So the time required to get ready for those events, I just didn't feel comfortable casting those events without putting all the time into test, which would then be 30, 40 hours of testing, right? For me to feel like I'm an expert. So I have not done the constructed events, but the limited one, I might reach out to the folks there just because it's limited. I don't need to practice at all. Right. Now, that's just my thing.
Now, would that be, if you won that, would that be the first GP Denver that you've won?
Yes, I've top 8'd at GP Denver, but I've never won a GP Denver.
So
it's not easy to win a GP.
I know. I just couldn't remember. I know you did well at a GP Denver at one point, but
right.
Man, this actually looks really cool. It's up north. I didn't know where Arcata was, but I mean, it's way up north. Like it's closer to Oregon than it is to San Francisco. Like, okay. It's like way up there. It's by Eureka.
Yeah, that's far because California.
Off of 101.
I will say, because I've done this drive a lot, that northern tip of California is so long. It
goes forever.
It's crazy. I feel like the distance between, for example, what we consider Northern California, which is San Francisco, right? The difference between like Los Angeles to San Francisco, which is a pretty long drive, it's like a 6-hour drive, is almost the same as San Francisco to the basically the Oregon border.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah, the truth is that San Francisco is actually middle California.
It's like middle of California.
And we just call it NorCal, but there's a whole lot going up all the way. But yeah, I mean, this is right off of 101. I bet you that place looks awesome. Anyway, that's a cool event. That does look really sweet. 3-day. Like, that's a full-on...
That is a full weekend, yeah.
That is a real thing.
Is it just all formats? Is that what's going on there?
Yeah, it looks like they've got a sealed, like a... let me look again. I just closed. It looks like they have like a kind of a big sealed event here. Command Zone, Modern 5K... Where did I find that? Here it is. Sunday, sealed 5K top 8, sealed 5K main event on Saturday. So they have a big sealed event and a big modern event, and then they have Command Zone going and then on demands.
Okay,
dude, that sounds legit. Yeah, this thing looks
like a
awesome.
like a mini Magic Con.
It does. Almost. It looks like exactly that, but in man, that the venue is like that.
You got a lot of space there, so.
Yeah, I'm curious how it looks like they're playing into the community center, which that sounds like would be difficult logistically, but I applaud them. I think that's cool. And man, if this was 10 years ago and I was traveling more for Magic stuff, like this would be on my list. Like that's a great, you take the 101 from here through Oregon. It is like, that's one of the best drives in the world. Like anyway. Yes. Have fun there, Virginia. Next question comes from Peter, who says, all right, here we go. Let's get into this. American football is somewhat on the rise over here in Germany and becoming a thing more and more. We're watching together as a family at Sunday nights, American afternoon, and getting more and more accustomed to the rules. My daughter roots for the Ravens, my son for the Eagles, and my wife for the Seahawks. Yes, Peter. Yes.
The Seahawks is so random.
Yeah. Seahawks is great. Wait a minute. And I really love to see the Lions play this season, says Peter.
Well, they're good this year.
That is incredible. I have to say that's funny because that is very much like, I don't know. There's probably, imagine like if Peter's actually from Germany, right? It would be like if it was me, the wife, and 2 kids, and it was like, we all like different Premier League teams or Bundesliga or something
right.
like that. It's like, wait, what? No.
The thing is, most people are fans of their home team, right?
Yes.
But there is no home team, so you just pick a team you like, right? Who was the one that was asking you to pick a basketball team for them? Was that Riley?
I think it was.
Somebody was like, I want to get into this basketball thing.
Yeah.
They were not American, and they were just like, and they were trying to figure out the merits of the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Cleveland. You know what I mean? They were trying to find a team, something along those lines. But yeah, that's really interesting because my household, everybody should be. Well, I'm a Lakers fan. I'm a Los Angeles fan, so everybody should be a Los Angeles. But the thing is, the kids actually grew up in Seattle.
Yeah.
But there's no basketball there, so.
Hey, wait for it. Wait for it.
It's coming back.
I'm thinking 2027 we're hooping.
Do you think that's the same time with Vegas? Vegas getting a team?
I think so. Because the rumors have been building and building for years now. Like there is an element in my heart of, okay, I've heard it before, show me. But like the what they keep saying is that they want to finish this they wanted to finish the TV deal, which they already did.
Right.
And then there's like a pending, like the Celtics are for sale. The Timberwolves are sort of in this weird situation. At any rate, it feels like when the dust settles, it would be a good time to tell the owners like, hey, do you want $30 million or $250 million each? And they'd be like, yes, we do.
The Celtics are for sale?
Yeah. Are you interested?
Can you imagine the Seattle Celtics?
They're not leaving. They're just changing ownership.
Oh, you mean the TV rights? Okay.
No. I mean the team.
When you
team.
said the Celtics are on sale, I'm like, that's hard to believe.
No, the Celtics. Like the Celtics team is for sale. Okay. It won't move.
It's gonna stay. It's gonna stay.
Yeah,
there.
it's just somebody else will buy it.
Well, hey, the Athletics were for sale and they moved over to Vegas. Right?
Yeah, so I mean. Hey, the Sonics weren't for sale and they got moved.
Exactly.
All right. So Peter, okay. So this is great. Cool. And obviously like number one in the household, Peter's wife, right? The Seahawks fan, like, come on. But because, well, you're close enough to Seattleite, Paul. I'm
surprised there's no Chiefs fans. Like, because it sounds like all of them latched onto a team that was doing well. Like the Lions are great this year. The Eagles have been good for the past few years. The Ravens have been very good as well. I'm surprised there's no Chiefs fans. I mean, they are clearly the team to beat, right? At least historically over the past 5-6 years. So
definitely
surprised there's no Chiefs fans in there.
I am too, and they have charismatic, Mahomes and Kelsey and stuff. Anyway. Okay. So Peter says, I often wonder why the teams do not go for a full Hail Mary with something like 5 seconds left on the clock just before halftime, even when they're behind. Why don't they simply go for it instead of letting the clock wind down? Is it the danger of suffering a, quote, pick six? Nice, Peter. Really, is the danger of suffering that really higher than the chance of making a touchdown when you throw the ball deep into the opposing field of play as a final play? Or is there some other reason I miss? P.S. Love that Paul's on the show. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, it's interesting, Peter. Football is becoming modernized, I would say, in these regards, where we as gamers are very dryly analytical and we're willing to make what we would call like the plus EV play, even if it looks silly, right? If you watch a professional level Magic player play, they'll make plays that look ridiculous, but they know that they're in such a bad position that they need to do that. And they couldn't give a crap what you think as a viewer about, like, they'll explain their play to you for 20 minutes after the game if you ask about it. But while they're playing, they do not care that you think it looks dumb. The problem is being an NFL head coach is a very visible profession, and you are in an untenable position as an NFL or any professional sports head coach. It's the same thing with football, in Europe too. I mean, those guys get sacked. Check this out. I'm on a roll here, Paul. Football sacked all the time, right? And even for potentially for reasons that don't actually make sense. The issue is that you are serving the ownership who gives you your job. You're also serving the fan base, and then to an maybe lesser extent or equal extent, you're also serving the players, right? And you have to make everybody happy, and that's impossible. The only thing that makes everybody happy in those scenarios is if you win the Super Bowl. Anything else, there's going to be somebody who's mad at you, somebody who wants you fired all the time. And so there's a element to that with, if you take this Hail Mary shot at the end of half just to try to free roll, something good happening, you may get it. They're extremely low percentage, but if it backfires on you, like, you could lose your job. Like, you absolutely could get torched by the media for the next 5 days about everybody going, why did he do that? It was too risky. And Paul, Peter's correct, right? It is because of that risk. It's like low upside and horrible downside.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, when you get to those situations where somebody just kind of tossing a Hail Mary, I mean, it's literally just, if you don't have an actual play, that's just a 50-50 play, right? That's just the quarterback just throws it up into the air and you're just kind of hoping to catch the ball. And then at that point, you're just thinking, okay, well, if I catch this ball, then I still need to catch the ball and not get tackled and make that touchdown. And but if I don't, and the other person takes it, all of a sudden, if the receiver misses, they have kind of an open field, right? It's just that it's in a lot of those instances, you'll have kind of a one-on-one situation. And then all of a sudden, if you get the pick, then all of a sudden you kind of have an open field, and it's kind of like that person gets a free shot at trying to get a touchdown. And that looks so incredibly bad as if you're a head coach. And, being a head coach, that's one of the most volatile jobs you can ever have, where just a couple of things go wrong. Like, we've had coach of the years just do poorly in the playoffs and get fired right away.
Totally.
Right. So it's just, you have to, a lot of it is also just risk management when you're kind of managing those games, where for us, we just think, okay, well, if it's just a 50-50, I mean, it's probably marginally better to just chuck the ball, right? Just because it's super unlikely for that person to actually pick the ball and run it 90 yards for a touchdown. But then there's a risk element of it, because imagine they actually do, and then everybody's going to go, well, what the hell were they thinking?
Right.
Why would they do that? It's probably just better to throw maybe a 10-yard pass that is very likely for your receiver to catch, and then have them make a play to make the touchdown instead of just chucking it. And they probably, at this point, a lot of the math has probably been done on these situations, especially the end of halves, where I think a lot of people kind of have determined, risk versus reward. Hey, if you hand the ball off to a guy, that person can just break free and score a touchdown too, right? That's also a Hail Mary, but with much, much less risk. Yeah. So that's what a lot of teams tend to do. Now the question is, for teams that just put the knee down and just don't even run the play, that's a different question. That's a different situation, where they're just like, we're not even going to bother risking a turnover there. And sometimes you see teams do that when they have a lead, right? If they're up 14-0, they go, well, we don't need to put ourselves in a position where they can have this 2 or 5% thing happen, and I'm just going to just relax here and just kind of lower the risk overall because I'm already in the lead. But if you're behind, then you have to go for the Hail Mary, right? Then you see teams making riskier moves, especially towards the end of the games. And, you know this, you watch a ton of football, the viewer and their family, apparently. So you know that teams will go for the 2-point conversion. The teams will go for, 4th and 3, because they need to convert, or else they're just going to lose.
Right. And, the other thing to consider, I think here, Peter, this is getting into the weeds, but this is part of what these Q&A shows are for, is that, in order for a Hail Mary with 5 seconds, so 5 seconds on the clock means that by the time usually even the ball's thrown, the clock will already be at 0. So this is the last play of the quarter. The way football works is, as long as the play's live, it goes until the ball's dead. It goes out of bounds or somebody gets tackled. So you don't have a time limit on that individual play, which can work against you for the reasons that Paul said. But here's the issue. In order for that play to be, quote, profitable, like from our, poker magic style perspective, you have to literally score a touchdown. Like if you complete the pass and get down to the 1 yard line, that's 0. Like that's worth nothing, because you don't get another play, right? So you have to actually score. Like the only positive outcome for you is that you chuck a 50-50 ball into the end zone from wherever you happen to be, which have obviously a very, very low conversion rate, and your guy catches it and comes down. Every other outcome is either 0 or negative for you. And that is a tough value prop to look at. The more interesting situation that comes up all the time, and it's much more complicated, are fourth down situations. And, when Paul and I were growing up and watching football, the coaches were unbelievably conservative in those spots, and they would always just punt. I mean, it didn't matter. They could have the best running back in the world and be, a third of a yard, 1 foot from first down, and they're just like, punt it off. We'll be back to live another day or whatever. And eventually, it's still in the process of happening. The math nerds like us finally got into some of those seats in the football teams, and we're like, hey, we should be using this very, very valuable commodity of a down that we only get 4 of a little more aggressively than we are. And now you'll actually see coaches go for it on fourth down in a variety of situations that never, if you watch football from 20 years ago even, and especially if you go back to like when Paul and I were kids and stuff, they never, ever, ever did. But now they do, and now some coaches have reputations for being more math-based coaches, running these use cases and scenarios and actually applying them. And I love seeing that. I mean, that's one of the things I love about Magic is that we get to implement stuff like that, and each person gets to do it to the extent that they think that it's reasonable to do so. But, the stakes are obviously much lower for us. Go Hawks. Nobody. I don't have a football team. Do you even have a football team, Paul?
No, not really. I never got into football too much.
Guy?
When I really started getting into just sports in general, LA at the time just didn't have a football team. Yeah. So I was just thinking, okay, well, what's in Los Angeles? So I was a Lakers and Dodgers fan, right? That those are the two teams that were in Los Angeles. So those are the two teams that I'm going to be basically rooting for until the day I die. And for football, I mean, I'm in Vegas now. I guess there's the Raiders, which were
you probably should pick them up.
They were briefly in Los Angeles, yeah. But Marshall, they're really bad.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's you're talking to a guy who voluntarily started rooting for the Nets like 12 years ago. So
fair enough.
Ryan asked the next question. Hey guys, hope you're all doing well. My question is, should an opponent choosing to mulligan ever affect your own decision of whether to do so? I often find myself, intentionally or not, reevaluating this decision in my head once I see an opponent takes a mulligan, but this seems illogical if I really think about it. Also, always enjoying the Q&A episodes. Thanks for doing them. When you see your opponent, they win the die roll and they go, I'm going to go to 6 here. Does it change your equation?
I don't think it really should, especially with kind of, going down to 6 is not quite as catastrophic as it was back in the day. Now that now it's been 6 years now since the London Mulligan, 7 years. But, now the fact that you can still look at a 7 and sculpt your perfect hand, if your opponent's going on the play and they're going to 6, right? You don't know if they're aggressively mulliganing to have a quick draw. That could be certainly something that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what your opponent is on, then you can't just keep a slower or riskier hand just because you think they're going to have an overall lower power level in their hand. Now, if you know your opponent's playing some kind of Grixis control deck, right? Your game 3, mm-hmm. They're on the play and they're going to 6, and you know that you can change your keeps based on what your opponent's playing. But I don't think you should change the way that you approach mulligans based on what your opponents decide to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there is a world, like what my thought process would be is, yes, you should, but you really shouldn't. And what I mean by that is it could change my decision. Let's say my opponent mulligans to 3. We're going to take an extreme example about like the lowest that anybody really ever mulligans to. If they mulligan to 3 and I'm looking at a hand that functions but isn't particularly good, I would be much more likely to keep that than an opponent who snap keeps on 7 and I'm looking at my hand going, this deck is missing some pieces, even though technically I can cast the spells in my hand or whatever, and I may mulligan in that scenario. But this is extreme. And the difference between 7 and 6, especially with the mulligan rules as they stand, isn't that big. And I wouldn't change it based off of somebody going to 6. It would take, for me probably them going to like 4. And then maybe I would use that as like more of a tiebreaker or a slight shading in a direction rather than like I'm going to restructure my game plan of mulliganing. So the answer is no. I would, in most scenarios, again, I'm going with what Paul was saying, which is that I'm assuming that we don't know what my opponent's on at all. Then I would just stick to my guns. I don't think the difference between 7 and 6 is enough to inform a different decision in really any realistic scenario.
Yeah. I mean, let's say you have a 1 lander on the draw and your opponent goes to 4. I mean, just mulligan.
Yes.
Right. It's just like, just don't need to take that chance. Now, the more interesting question is, let's say you have 4 lands and your hand is just all 4 drops, right? And you're on the draw. And so you're going to mulligan that almost every time.
Yeah.
Right. But if your opponent goes to 5 and you have 2 swamps, 2 mountains, and you know your deck has a bunch of cheap removal spells, like then do you consider keeping that? Right. Then it gets a little bit dicey. Whereas if your opponent snap keeps, you have to ship that hand back. You have nothing you can do for the first 4 turns of the game, first 3 turns of the game. Right. So
and then you're going to cast 1 spell a turn, with what you've got.
But I think a single mulligan should not really move the needle at all.
Yeah, it's just too much for our human brains to know the difference.
Right.
Good question, Ryan. Thanks for that. Next comes from Jeremy, who says, hello, Paul, Marshall, and Jeff. Producer Jeff with a shout out. Thank you once again for all your work in putting out the show. You're welcome, Jeremy. Paul, it's been great having you as a co-host. Thank you so much for sharing your time, talent, and insight. Wow. Jeremy's just like, I want a hug here. This is just great.
He loves the squad.
Yeah. We've asked Marshall this before, but I'm curious to learn, what are some of your favorite moments commentating from the booth?
Ooh, this is a good one.
Jeremy's bringing the heat.
We've had some really great moments.
You and I, Paul, have had some amazing.
I have 3. I can think of 3 offhand. Okay, so
I wonder if they're the same 3 that came to my mind. I know one of them is for sure. Okay, I think the second one is.
There's.
Does the third one have Brad in it?
Brad. Oh,
do you remember that?
Okay, yes, that's another one. Actually, I did not.
Okay, now I know. Okay, go ahead. Let's see how they lined up.
Okay. So number 1 is, this is one of my first Pro Tours that I've ever commentated. Actually, It might actually be my very first. And this was Pro Tour, I believe, Hour of Devastation in Kyoto, Japan. It was my first Pro Tour. And I got so lucky with this. But basically, we had an epic match in the top 8. Top 4?
Yeah, semis,
okay, top 4 between Paulo Vitor versus fan favorite Yam Wing Chun. And Yam had piloted this game beautifully to the point. I mean, what's funny is Mono Red was the best deck at the time. And there was actually a lot of back and forth to it. And I actually was really intrigued with kind of how players would sequence their spells to kind of, get an edge in the matchup. But one of the best cards in that deck was a card, Hazaret the Fervent, which was a 4-mana 5/4 creature with haste. But she can only attack if you have 1 or fewer cards in hand. And Yam was behind the entire game and was just struggling to stay alive, finding some ways to get some damage in here and there. But then all of a sudden, with kind of being behind on board, saw the line. And the line was to fire off a bunch of burn spells to get Paulo Vitor low enough where if he top decks something, a burn spell rather, he can win by basically killing Paulo with Hazaret on the final attack with the burn spell. And he ripped the perfect card. His hands were shaking. This was for the finals of the Pro Tour. Everything was on the line. And Yam literally drew the perfect card. You could hear his friends literally screaming, and the sound just echoed through the entire Pro Tour. So I think he heard that too, and he got really excited. His hands were literally shaking.
Yeah.
So he draws the card. He has the win. He's about to beat one of the greatest Magic players of all time. He then grabs his Hazaret and shows that he wants to attack with the Hazaret. He did not cast his spell. He had 2 cards in hand, and we are now in the attacker step. he missed the opportunity to attack with Hazret because he got so excited and ended up losing that game because he couldn't attack with Hazret. That's number one.
Yeah, well, okay, but I have to add a little.
Okay, sorry.
Paul correctly saw the line ahead of time about the burn spell thing, which is his job. Like that was like, I knew it, I'm like, all right, Paul's good. Like this is good. But then this is where Paul went absolutely above and beyond. He also was ahead of the you can't attack, because it all happened so fast. It would have been very forgivable for us to kind of follow the action in that case where he goes and we go, oh, wait a minute, he can't. No. Paul was all over it. He's like, no. And then Yami goes to combat, and then the chat just melted. And I mean, that was honestly one of the best calls I've ever been a part of. And it was because you were so on top of that. I was like blown away by that. Yeah, that's probably my favorite. That's probably just like my favorite individual call that I've done at all in any of my stuff. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I was just excited at the actual moment, but I forgot that I was actually a part of it. But yes, that was a historic, it's like if you talk about like top 5 moments in the top 8 of Pro Tours, if you talk about like top 5 maybe blunders or unfortunate things, that's got to be on there.
Definitely.
For sure. Yeah. The other one was in the top 8 of the World Championship. I believe this was in Hawaii. Or no. This was a remote event. I think that's what it was. I actually don't remember, but it was a top 8.
It was remote. I remember being in my office.
You know what this one is?
I do know.
This was Andre Strasky playing against
Paul.
playing against. I don't remember who it was. It might have been JED.
Was it? I thought it was Paulo. I guess it maybe.
Yeah, it was against another great player. Okay. Because it's the World Championship and they're in the top 8. But anyways, there was this mechanic. It was called Learn, right? No, not Learn. It's what's the one where you can search for cards outside of the game?
Is it Lesson?
Lesson. So he had a lesson, but one part about the lesson that basically nobody ever uses is you can use it to rummage instead of actually just getting the card, because you almost always want to use your lesson to get something, right? But Andre was in a situation where basically he had almost no outs, and he was just like, well, I have this card and there's nothing that I can get from a lesson that actually matters. So the only thing I can do is cast this card as a rummage effect, then basically leave the appropriate mana to find an interactive spell to survive this game. And you and I were setting this up, and I was like, Marshall, I think there's only one thing he can do. Like, he has to rummage. And it's just very unintuitive. That's just not something you almost ever do. And he saw the line and then drew the card that he needed. And it was just absolutely perfect. The unfortunate part is he ended up losing the match.
Yeah.
But because had he won that game and then won the match and let's say he became the world champion, that would have been absolutely historic. Sadly, he actually did not end up getting it done, but that was a pretty sick.
And that was another absolutely sick call by you, because you actually saw that line and we were ahead of that happening. And it was like, because you actually called out not just that interaction that you could rummage to try to find it, but it was like a 1 mana spell he needed to find that he could cast in that moment. I mean, it was like an extremely narrow case, and you were somehow ahead of that too. Again, it would have been totally fine for us to follow that after it happened. But the fact that you were ahead of it made that call so much better. Yeah. Anyway.
And my number 3, well, there's so many. But this one, surprisingly, I will say this one is probably the one where I got the most emotionally invested, or I got the biggest physical reaction. And this was actually the Mythic Invitational. Mm-hmm. This was actually the Mythic Invitational, and at that event I was casting with Ailey, mm-hmm. I believe. Ailey. It was her very first event. It was in the top 8, and the only reason why this event was really special to me was there was a live audience. This was at PAX.
At PAX.
This was at PAX. Yeah, and there was a live audience, and like the fans were just going absolutely nuts. It was actually great. It was the atmosphere was so electric. It felt like that moment. It felt like that's what you kind of wanted esports to be.
That was the dawn of the esports era, and we were, as it turns out, unnecessarily hopeful because it was awesome.
Right, because that event, everything went super well with regards to the hype from the crowd at PAX, and it was huge. And basically, there was this card, Experimental Frenzy, and I mean, this card is just nuts. It's a 3 in a red enchantment. You basically get to play cards off the top of your library, right? And it's just absolutely insane. And basically, what had happened was somebody had cast a Desperation Experimental Frenzy and rattled off like 4 spells in a row and just won the game just because the frenzy went absolutely bonkers. And the crowd was just getting super hyped. And then I was getting hyped as a result. And I literally had a physical reaction. This was a physical negative reaction. But basically, I got so hyped that my adrenaline got pumped so high that my lower back started physically hurting.
It like spasmed or something?
Yeah, no, well, I have this lower back injury that I've been dealing with since I was in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And it every now and then it'll flare up. And I guess when the adrenaline just started pumping through my body, it started centralizing in my lower back. And I was just like, that's crazy. I wish we can have events like this all the time. And I think that's what the folks at Wizards was also hoping for. But sadly, we didn't quite reach where we needed to be. But that for me, that was just a physical reaction that I got more than this crazy call that I made. But that was also a memorable one.
Yeah, I wonder if that's why the esports era failed. Because it was too dangerous for your lower back.
Yeah, you know what?
We had to dial it down.
Thank you, Wizards, for not causing me more physical harm.
Jeremy says, Marshall, I've been finding some of the stories behind the watches you've worked on recently. Pretty awesome. What are a couple of your favorite stories behind the watches you've worked on? Well, I started taking outside watches on the watch repair channel that I do. And I get a lot of requests, like an absolutely absurd amount of requests. And so I can be kind of picky about which ones I work on because I don't actually work on that many like in a year. So one of the factors that I use when I decide what to work on is the story behind it. So that's probably why, Jeremy, is part of it is because I'm kind of picking and choosing based on like what watch it is, how broken it is, if I can fix it. And then also, if I find the story interesting. But the one that kind of kicked it off for me in that way was, and it sort of set the tone. It was early in me taking on outside watches. One of my first ones after I, kind of built up my skill set and felt more comfortable. But it was a lady whose father had passed away. He had bought the watch in Vietnam. He was stationed there. And then he had come home and he wore the watch his whole entire life. And he left it to her. And she decided to take it out to the beach where her and her family were going clamming. And clamming is, I don't know if people that don't live, near the ocean know, but it's basically like you need a little bit of equipment, like a bucket and this special kind of shovel thing. And you kind of find where the clams are in the sand and then you dig them out basically. And, that's how, you can get dinner or whatever. And it's also kind of a fun activity or something. Anyway, but it also involves like reaching down into the sand and into the water. And, it's kind of a messy thing to do. And she was wearing the watch, but she didn't realize a very, very, very critical part about watches like that, which is that the crown, that's the part that you wind on a watch. On a sports watch or a watch that has some level of waterproofness to it, it usually is what they call a screw down crown, where like it doesn't just sort of click up against the case. It actually has a threaded element that you tighten it down. And if you don't tighten it down, your watch is not going to be waterproof. And not only did she not tighten it down, it was open. Like she had changed the time on the watch and just didn't know that she needed to put it back down. And she stuck her hand in one of those, into a, like a puddle basically. And salt water got into the watch. And that's death. I mean, salt water is like highly corrosive. It's really, 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 really bad. Then she didn't know what to do, so she kind of set it on the windowsill and just left it. And then she took it to a watch repair place locally, and they were like, hell no, like I'm not touching that thing. So then she took it to Rolex, and they sent it back to Geneva in Switzerland, where Rolex is based. And Rolex was like, nope, we're not touching that thing. And she ran out of options. So she reached out to me after a friend of hers told her that she had watched one of my videos or something. And, she was emotional about it. I mean, I met up with her because she's local. So we just met at a Starbucks and she kind of told me the story. But I mean, she was just like, nobody will touch this thing. And she said, I have money. Like, I don't, it's not a financial issue. I will pay what it takes to get this fixed, but nobody will do it. And she said that she felt like she ruined her dad's watch, and it's like, this is the thing that she got when he passed away. And this is the thing that he wore every single day for 40 years straight, So she was devastated. And I did fix it up for her. And I got to meet up with her and actually hand it to her, which I don't normally get to do. Normally it's in the mail. And she was crying. I mean, it was awesome. It was like, wow, like it really hammered home for me, just how important these, like, it's not just a financial object or it's not really about the watch, right? It's about something that you can associate with somebody who may not be here anymore. And that's, that carries a lot more weight to it than just the mechanics of some wristwatch or whatever. So that's kind of the one for me that really hammered it home and that I think about when I do. And also, I don't actually talk about this on the watch channel, but I can talk about it here because, whatever. But like, I don't charge people when I work on them for the channel. And that's part of the reason why is that like, it just didn't feel right, to do that. And so like with her, I just said, you're good. Like, don't worry about it. If I have to buy some parts, I'll say, hey, I had to buy these parts and then they can reimburse me for that part of it. But like, I don't charge for the restoration part or any of the work or anything like that. And part of that is because of the experience with her where I was just like, this just does not feel right to me, to charge her for this. Even though she had the money and she was great. She actually, she sent me a gift in the mail, which was an old pocket watch that she had. It's really old, like early 1800s, I would guess. Like it's really, really old, maybe mid 1800s. But anyway, and she, just did that because she was happy or whatever. So anyway, I got a lot of stories, but that's kind of my main one. And by the way, I don't know if karma exists, but that's my number one performing video. Like ever. So
nice.
Why
do you think Rolex sent it back?
I know
you would
why
think
they
Rolex would be able to fix that, right?
Yeah. So the reason is because it was old and they only stock parts on their watches up through a certain year. And then at some point they don't have any more of those parts and it would literally require them remanufacturing those parts, which isn't economically viable for them as a company. Okay. So they just at some point say just no.
So they won't bother looking to go purchase that part.
Nope.
To fix the watch. They just need to have it basically.
Yeah. Okay. So the big manufacturers, they hold themselves to an extremely high, like an unreasonably high standard when it comes to things like this, where like they will only put new parts into a watch. Like they would view it as insufficient to put a perfectly functional used part into a watch.
Got it.
Yeah. But they have to deal with a lot more than I do. This is personal for me, right? Like if the person has an issue, they can just email me and I can take care of it. But with Rolex, it's like their reputation.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And also the thing about Rolex is they're one of the best examples in the whole world ever of scaling effectively. They make a significant number of watches per year, but they maintain quality, and that's extremely difficult to do, and they do it. Thank you for the question, Jeremy. Next comes from Evan, who says, thoughts on the Cube schedule on Arena, leaving us with only Pioneer Masters this week is a deep cut, especially after having to limp through the holiday season on Foundations, a set whose best characteristic is that it isn't Pioneer Masters. And then Evan did drop an update. They've dropped Dustmore and Flashback early. I'm content, though I still want more Cube. What do you think about that? Because, the base question from Evan here is Cube schedule on Arena. Like, should they have fired it off when we were in this kind of two okay sets, one's going away. I mean, the whole Foundation's going away thing, by the way, just seemed completely off and not right and weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably their most challenging month of the entire year. The issue is there's such a long break because, this is the winter break and there's always such a long break between sets. And this one is especially long with Foundations coming out, in November, and basically a new base set not being released until mid-February. That's a big chunk of time. So they needed to figure out what to do. They kind of held the fort with Pioneer Masters coming out in December. If anything, they probably should have just released that a little bit later. I felt like it came out a little too quickly after the release of Foundations, where you just didn't give Foundations enough time to breathe. Because if that was the case, people might still be interested in drafting Pioneer Masters now. But yes, this month I was even wondering myself. I'm like, what videos am I going to make? Like, what are people going to even want to see at this point? And at least from what I can tell from my videos, people still enjoy Foundations more than they like Pioneer Masters. So it's a little bit odd to see Foundations rotating out. I'm of the belief that whatever main set release is out, that should be out until the next one comes out.
Definitely.
You should never cycle it out. That should always be available to draft. People are still going to be drafting Foundations at their locals. You can't draft Pioneer Masters at your local store.
Right.
People are still going to be drafting Foundations at their local store until Ether Drift comes out. So why remove it from Arena? Just let it be there until people stop playing it. Maybe people are just not playing Foundations anymore and they're cycling it out. But it feels very odd to me that they made the decision to cycle it out with 3 weeks to go.
Yes.
And I feel like that should be the default. That should stick around and they should be implementing other stuff. Like, I'm okay with them bringing Cube in right now. I think that's fine. Even bringing back Duskmourn feels a little bit weird just because we just had it, right?
Totally.
It feels like you should wait until maybe the end of next year to bring it back for the nostalgia, where right now I'm just like, oh, I still remember what all the archetypes are. I still remember, and it's just not that far off. And I know why they're doing it, because Duskmourn is beloved by everybody and it's popular. So they're bringing it back. And I posted a video today and it's already doing well because people love Duskmourn. So I get it. It's just the timing of everything felt a little bit off, but props to them. Foundations was supposed to be cycled out basically the other day. And we were just going to have a Pioneer Masters draft and Foundation and Duskmourn quick drafts for this week. And I was like, man, that's going to be rough. And they made the decision to basically bring Duskmourn back, Duskmourn Premier Draft back, where you get to draft with real people a week early. And I think that was a really excellent decision, because now I'm excited, because now I can just make a bunch of Duskmourn content, because I think people will enjoy that.
Yeah. To me, it's interesting because I always try to put myself in the shoes of the people who are making these decisions, and having had insight into that over the years, and also I think that anybody who's made their own thing, whatever that thing is, like in this case, a podcast, in my case, a podcast, I should say, but anything like that, where you actually have to be the person to make the actual decision. And it doesn't usually pay off to just make literally the first decision that comes to your mind, right? Like, everybody has an opinion. Oh, what should Wizards do with Foundation? Oh, just take it off, right? It's like, it's the first thing that comes to your mind. Just take it out, or just leave it on there, right? It's just like the first thing that you do not know all the different factors that go into this. So what I like to do is just say, well, that's not my problem. I'm a limited player and I'm going to give my perspective as a limited player. And this is annoying and I don't like it. And I agree with you 100% that if you're going to commit to having these sets like this, they need to just stay on until the next one comes out. That has to be a base rule. But also think about this, Paul. They decide to shoehorn Pioneer Masters in. Now you've diluted the player base over 2 sets. And let's just be honest, both of these sets are kind of mid-tier sets, right? These aren't big headliners with new characters being introduced and this deep gameplay like Duskmourn was. This is, we're going to check a box for constructed, and then we're going to check a different box for different constructed. Like, these are not, meant to be limited headliners. Foundations is exceeding expectations, and Pioneer checked the box. So it's like, fine. But, these aren't those type of sets. And now you've diluted the player base over 2 of them. What are you going to do? Throw Cube into the mix? You're just going to have 3 Qs that never fire, right? I mean, because you've got no place to aim people And so my takeaway from that is this is the artifact downside. This is what happens when you overdo sets. Whoever was in the meeting three floors up, the executive suite or whatever from where the designers are, and thought, hey, there's going to be a month and a half stretch where we either only have Foundations and Pioneer Masters together, or we're going to somehow try to get Cube in here. They screwed up. These are two not particularly amazing sets, and we're diluting the player base too much. So to me, as a limited fan, I'm like, this is just annoying. Like, why? Like, this is not right. This is not what I want. This doesn't feel like the right way to do this. You have to point me in a direction. You can put other stuff on the side for people that want to dabble, but you need to point me in a direction as a limited player. When I log on to Arena, I don't want to think about, well, what format am I supposed to be playing? It's like, I know what I'm supposed to be playing. I'm supposed to be playing Foundations, and then in this case, Pioneer Masters if I happen to like it better for some reason. Yeah. But even then the queue times get a little long. So there's no room for Cube here. So to me, I mean, I'll play the Arena Cube sometimes, but they usually end up being one note or not feeling well-rounded and not bringing the Cube experience that I really like. So I generally don't stick with it for too long. So I kind of don't care. Like, there's a part of me that's like, I don't know, like I'm very much more focused on whatever the base set is at any given time. That's kind of where I have to be. Like, we talk about it on the show, or there might be a pro tour coming up and that kind of stuff too. So there's those considerations for me specifically, but still I don't like it when they spread it too thin like this.
Yeah. And I mean, I get it from their side, like you said, like a business perspective,
they want to make more money.
Pioneer Masters only is Arena only. So they want to keep pushing that and have that out for as long as possible. But then making the decision to basically just remove Foundations just seems incorrect. And I mean, I think you were even showing kind of the numbers. I think the episode you did with Sutcliffe, was it like split exactly 50-50?
At that time it was, yeah.
Right. And you would expect more people to potentially play Pioneer Masters because it's the new shiny toy.
Right.
But that's not the case. And if that is the case, and it's kind of split 50-50, also, I bet there's going to be a pretty big drop off in people who choose to play Pioneer Masters after the Arena Open. I think that was one of the main factors for a lot of the competitive minded people.
It was for me
to play Pioneer Masters draft. Me as well.
Totally.
I played a lot that week, the week before. I haven't drafted a ton since. Right.
Me too. And remember, I had gone back to Foundations after that initial, 2 weeks or week and a half on Pioneer Masters. And I kind of felt like, I get it. Like, I've seen enough Gates, decks or whatever. And then I just found that I was enjoying Foundations much more. But I did do a solid week of Pioneer Masters drafts, just to reacquaint myself with the set and make sure I felt comfortable for the Arena Open. So it probably fell off. By the way, thanks, Evan, for the question. The next question is somewhat Cube related as well. This is from Nate, who says, I've noticed a vintage Cube talk has been mostly absent. I realize that Paul is playing what the people want to watch, but is Marshall more interested in Foundations than the extended holiday Cube this year? And the answer is, yeah, kind of. There's multiple, but there's two bigger reasons for that. One of them is Luis is on his leave, and he's kind of our vintage Cube guy, right? I mean, he knows everything, and doing, shows specific about vintage Cube without Luis just feels like not the right play to do, because we have literally one of, if not the best vintage Cube players in the entire world on this podcast as a co-host. So we should probably wait for him to be here before we do vintage Cube episodes. And the other one, at least for me, is that it is difficult when your attention gets spread, like Foundations, Pioneer Masters, to jump ship for me. It's hard. I have to kind of point my brain in a direction when it comes to draft, because I don't like having the overhead of having to constantly get reacquainted. Like when I heard Duskmorn was back, like our friend Jay, he messaged, and because he loves and is very good at Duskmorn. And so he was showing me some of the decks and some of the stuff that he had been doing. And I haven't done a Duskmorn draft yet. And it's like, I kind of have to say, am I going to do this instead of whatever's there? In this case, yes, I am, because Duskmorn was dope and there's really nothing else to do. But like, I also might fire up Magic Online and just be like, I'm not going to be playing Duskmorn. I'm going to be vintage cubing, that kind of thing. and I have to make those decisions as I go. And it turns out that in this case, I have a podcast and I need to be able to talk about these formats. And that means I needed to play a bunch of Pioneer Masters, especially when it first came out. And I needed to be up on Foundations. And then we had the Arena Open that made me go back to Pioneer Masters. I can't draft all the things all the time. So something has to go. And that's why I miss it. I am not over Vintage Cube. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I enjoy it as well, but with kind of me spreading my time between two sets already with Foundations and Pioneer Masters, I just didn't really have the bandwidth. Mm-hmm. I experimented with some Cube stuff, and it was okay, but I think it just, for me, at least with my personal goals, and I like my main priority is of course my channel as well. It's like I just need to make sure that I'm good at the things that I'm creating content for. So if I'm not making a video for Foundations or Pioneer Masters, I'm still drafting Foundations and Pioneer Masters offline as well, to just make sure that I can be an expert in the format, right? And share my knowledge. If I'm just jamming a bunch of cube drafts on the side, that's not going to help me with what I'm trying to do. If it was just one set that was out, if it was just Foundations, then I'm good, right? Like after a month and a half, after 6 weeks of Foundations, you've kind of locked in on Foundations. Yeah, then maybe I can dabble in some Cube as well. But right now, I had to kind of stay on top of both formats. It was just don't have the time for the Cube stuff. And also, I get my daily fix watching LSV's Cube videos anyways. So I feel like I'm good.
You're up
like
to speed.
I basically do a Cube draft a day. I'm just watching Luis do it and not me.
There you go. While you have breakfast. Next question comes from Corey, who says, "Hey, LR team, show's great. Y'all are great. Paul, great. Okay. To the heater of a question, branding. When I think of the LR hosts, there is a consistent narrative that persists with each, and we need to find that for Paul. So reframing it into an SAT-esque question, if LSV's branding is being super unlucky and never opening power, that's right. And Marshall's is righteous soapboxing on set speed, then what is Paul's? Nonsense aside, I love the show as always. And I leave you with the best comment I can. Time spent with LR is time well spent. Thank you. Thank you, Corey. That's hilarious. That is really good. So what is it, Paul? What is your...
I feel like that's something that's not for me, but for people who watch the videos to come up with, right? This is not, this is like, I guess you can manufacture your own branding and do things a certain way, but I feel like a lot of what sticks or what... Right. Yes. Luis definitely does a lot of manufacturing and a lot of them don't hit.
He's not even the same person off of the podcast. He's unrecognizable.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
He's just a big branding exercise, basically.
Yeah. So I'll just have kind of leave that to the people to figure out kind of what my thing is, because I can't really come up with one offhand. So I don't know. I mean,
I've got some ideas, but you're right. It has to be natural. So, Corey, we're going to keep our eye out for it, though, Corey. That's what we'll do.
Okay.
Because, I mean, we know that I intentionally branded myf as righteous soapbox guy.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You're like, you know what? I just want to be that guy.
That's a good look for me. Go for that. Next question comes from James. Marshall, why do you always skip the foil when doing a Crack-A-Pack in the Play Booster era? Every paper pack has a foil in it. I'm pretty sure Arena counts for the foil as well. Is that true? Do they? Which is why you sometimes see the pack with a duplicate card in it. Is that what that is? Anyway, I enjoy listening to the Crack-A-Packs, but I want the full experience. And Nate follows up and says, just to add, MTGO also has a foil in every pack. I'll read it. I will do that. I was trying to mimic what I thought was the Arena experience, because I assume at this point that more people are playing on Arena than anywhere else from our listener base. But if that's the case, if Arena is accommodating that foil, then I will include it. Thank you, James. Next is from Ron Laufe. That means runner or fast walker in German, by the way. Seems like Burglar Rat and similar cards, Virus Beetle, Nezumi, Informant, etc., have become mainstays in recent limited sets and are actually performing well in the right decks. What do you find it when do you find it best to fire these off? On curve or later when they have fewer cards in hand and you're more likely to hit something big and important than what they've been building towards?
Oh, that's actually a great question. I think if you can hold it, in most instances, it's better to just wait. So the way that what I mean is, if you have a hand where you have a 2-mana 2/2 and you have a Burglar Rat, you just play the 2/2. Like, don't play the Burglar Rat. You want to play to the board, and you want to play generally with as much combat stats as possible, and then kind of play accordingly. Now, things change when you have other 2-mana 1/1s. Like, let's say you have something like a Helpful Hunter and you need land drop number 3 versus a 2-mana 2/2. Then you run out the Helpful Hunter to try to hit your land drop. But for me, with Burglar Rat specifically, like, I will play a turn 2 if I don't have a turn 2 play. Like, I think you should just use your mana in the early turns of the game. But if you have the opportunity to play something else, I will do something else. And that's kind of my approach with the Burglar Rat. Now, of course, that changes once you get to the late game. When your opponent's down to maybe 2 cards, I have had the experience where I go, oh, well, my opponent has 2 cards. They're going to draw a card for turn. They're probably going to play one of their cards, and then I can just fire off the Burglar Rat to kill the last thing, and they go land double spell.
Oh, yeah.
And I regret everything. Feels bad. So in that case, once you get to like turn 4, turn 5, and your opponent has 2 cards, and then you have the choice between maybe playing a Grizzly Bear or 2-mana 2/2 versus the Burglar Rat, it's usually best to just fire off the Burglar Rat just to make sure that you can get your card. But early on, I like playing anything else basically to play to the board, because the card that they discard is going to be the least relevant card in your opponent's hand that early into the game.
Yeah, I do the exact same math. And I am willing, if they have 2 cards in hand, to give up a pretty, like I will play a Burglar Rat over a 4-drop in some scenarios to get that card. Like, especially if it's 1 card left, like, I'm getting that thing. Like, that Burglar Rat's going to eat. Like, I'm not playing a 2-mana 1/1 that doesn't get anything.
Yeah.
Next question comes from Josh, who says, hey guys, hope all is well. Which set are you guys most excited for this year? And on the opposite end, which set are you least excited for? The sets are Ether Drift, Tarkir, Dragonstorm, UB Final Fantasy, Edge of Eternities, UB Spider-Man, and the unannounced UB, which rumors have it as Avatar: The Last Airbender. Quick question, Marshall. I know you were a Brooklyn Nets fan because of Durant. Does that mean that you're now a Phoenix Suns fan? If so, I hope their season's turned around. Take care, guys. Okay, I will address that one really quickly. I'm actually not a Brooklyn Nets fan because of Durant. I was a ardent Seattle Supersonics fan. They were ruthlessly ripped from our fair city. I took about 3.5 or 4 years of not watching the NBA as a result, because I was just hurt, I guess, or angry or whatever. I was just like, screw this. Then I missed it too much, especially when I started doing coverage and hanging out with Steve Sadin and BDM and those guys that are all basketball heads. And I'm like, oh man, because I'm a junkie, like basketball is like in my blood. And so I was like, all right, I gotta do something. And right at that time, it was about 2012, the New Jersey Nets, as they were known at the time, were moving to Brooklyn. They were rebranding. Jay-Z had a purchase, and it was like all these different things moving around with that. And I was like, this new branding's pretty cool. Like, I like Brooklyn. I like New York. Like, I need somebody to root for, and I'm going to jump on. And they had new ownership too. So like everything was restarting. It felt like a fresh start for that franchise. And I decided to jump on board, and for like a year, it looked pretty cool. They spent a ton of money. They kind of traded away their future for some aging stars, which seemed very suspect. But I thought maybe I could get a good 2 or 3 year run out of this. Maybe they'll make a run at the championship. This is going to be exciting. And within like a year, it had more or less just completely fallen apart. And I've been on like a horrible roller coaster ride ever since. But I'm too stubborn to leave. The only team I will leave my Nets for are the Sonics when they come back, in which case I will drop the Nets like the bad habit that they are. But Kevin Durant is one of my absolute favorite players. And when he signed with the Nets, I was really excited about it. But unfortunately, they signed one of my least favorite players, just Kyrie Irving. Not as a person, but just, the way he plays, he's a good player and everything. But I just have never seen like a scenario where I really felt confident in him being one of the main players on the team that didn't have LeBron James on it. So anyway, that completely fell apart. and now they're horrible again. So that's why.
I guess
and I'm not a Phoenix Suns fan.
You couldn't just follow the franchise to Oklahoma.
Come on, dude. Are you just trying to... You're
trolling.
So good. You're trolling.
They're the best team on the West,
good. We got a
Marshall.
chance to go watch that game in Vegas.
SGA MVP.
They're so good. It's so annoying. They're fun to watch. They play right. Ugh, it's so annoying. They're supposed to be here.
And that's the thing. They do everything, and they have all the types of players that you would love.
Totally.
Right?
Role models, young guys. They play right.
Two-way players. They have fun. They love the game.
It's so annoying.
And they're still getting better.
I
cannot like the Thunder because they were stolen from us.
I cannot. I hate the Thunder, even though they are exciting to watch. Josh's main question, though, is what set are you most excited for? Well, how do we answer this? Like, I don't know what's in the set yet.
I think so. So the question is mostly just what plane / themes are you excited about? For example, some people
not care.
Some people really like Ravnica. Some people maybe liked Tarkir.
I guess what I would say, Josh, is that I don't really care about visiting Tarkir as a plane, but
dragons.
I don't care about that either. I mean, you could make them, fuzzy bears in the air. I don't care.
Yeah.
Stuffed animals. And it's like, cool, I attack it with a stuffed animal. But Tarkir has had some nice stuff over the years. And they've had some really great sets in that plane. And if they decide to go relive some of those, we'll call it like rules-based themes, I'm interested. So that would be the one I would pick. Final Fantasy, Spider-Man, and maybe Avatar: The Last Airbender. Definitely not excited about those.
Okay. So Final Fantasy for me has a very special place in my heart because that's when I really started getting into gaming. And that is when Final Fantasy VII came out on the PlayStation.
And
I remember
all-timer.
Going over to my friend's house and we would quietly play till like 3 a.m. This is when I was in 7th grade or something. And I was sleeping over at my friend's place and my friend's room would have like a little bit of light can go through the bottom of the door. So we would block the bottom of the door with pillows so the lights wouldn't come out. So the parents wouldn't catch us playing. And we were just obsessed with that game. So just all things Final Fantasy VII related, that's just the game that resonates. When I think of PlayStation, I think of Final Fantasy VII. And so for me, I guess if there is something cool or interesting to see, it would be kind of how Magic approaches Final Fantasy and if they do a good job of showcasing the themes from Final Fantasy. I thought they did a pretty good job with the Lord of the Rings set. So it's hard to follow that up, but hopefully they can do something with Final Fantasy.
Are these sets in your mind going to be more like that, like how they implemented Lord of the Rings? Because I agree that was pretty elegant. Like that played out. I mean,
I don't know.
It might not be fair because Lord of the Rings, you could make the argument that Magic is based on the same world.
It
or
wasn't
similar.
a far departure, right? You just add some new characters and then add a ring, and then you're kind of there.
Yeah. Okay. Next question comes from Hans, who says, "Hey, Marshall and Paul, I have a watch question." Oh, here we go.
So Marshall.
Yeah. Actually, he says, I have a watch question, Marshall. And then says, hope that's okay. And yes, it absolutely is. These Q&A episodes, again, we love to talk about all types of topics. For our Patreon question of the week, we usually keep it more Magic, but for Q&A, it's anything goes. My brother bought me my first automatic watch for my birthday, a Vostok Amphibia. That's a Russian watch. The watch is a little fast, and I'm wondering how to tell how much of that is normal for my watch and how much is due to other factors like maybe magnetism. Thanks for the show. I love Magic, but I'm also a budding watch enthusiast. That's awesome. Yeah, you're on the right path there. So basically the way that this works, Paul, I don't know if this is interesting at all, but tell me so watches are subject to the laws of gravity.
Okay.
And the thing is, when you wear a watch, you move your wrist around a lot throughout the day. You wave at people, you write stuff down. Sometimes it's hanging down by your side. Sometimes you scratch your head. And all of that affects the moving parts within the watch. And that can affect the timekeeping. So when you decide, when you regulate a watch, meaning you set it to keep the best time possible, you actually have to set it in different positions. Upside down, right side up. And most of the time, if you want to do a really good job, you'll set it in 5 different positions. And then you'll take the delta, the average distance, or the biggest distance between those readings. And that'll give you kind of a range that the watch will keep time at. And every company, every movement, every watch falls in different ranges. Some of them, like a more inexpensive watch, like the watch that Hans got, it's not cheap, but this is like a imported kind of lower, like it's not up to like the Swiss watch industry standards or the Japanese watch industry standards, but they're still pretty decent. They're okay. Those will have much lower standards for that timekeeping than a watch, maybe that comes from Switzerland or something like that, depending on the company. So in order for you to know this, though, you do need a tool, a machine. It's called a time grapher. And the air quote real ones are really expensive. They're $5,000 or $6,000. But you can buy, and this is what I use, by the way, Chinese versions that are much cheaper. They're under $200.
Oh.
And you can actually put your watch on there and you can see how it's running, and it'll tell you a bunch of things about it. But the one that he's focusing on here is if it's running fast or slow and how much it's running fast or slow. And, Hans is saying, well, my watch is running a little bit fast. And it could be regulated, Hans, to probably run even tighter on tolerance. But with, an Amphibia, that's again, a Russian made watch, that's probably pretty normal. You wouldn't expect that watch to keep like insanely great time. So if it's running a little bit fast, but if it's running a lot fast, you can usually regulate it. You can change the rate at which the watch runs, but you would need that machine to tell you how it was doing. Next question comes from Jonathan, who says, "Hi, Marshall and Paul. Thanks for the entertaining and informative podcast. As a result of drafting a lot on Arena, I win a lot of booster packs and crack them all at the end of the format. In doing this, I've acquired a surplus of wild cards, more than I could ever use. For each set that I draft, I've been collecting all the common, uncommon, and rare cards, which makes my wild cards even less necessary. I'd be curious to know how many accumulated wild cards you have in your account as limited players on Arena, and about how many boosters packs you win per set. What do you think of the trick I have tried where I craft all the rares I have not collected from drafting the set that I finish, so that when I crack the packs, it gives me more gems instead of first finishing my collection instead of missing the rare cards?" That is definitely the way to do it. You want to maximize for gems. If you ever watched Ryan Spain's stream, it was called Going Optimal, and he showed a lot of methods to make sure he basically showed you a way to approach the economy on Arena from the perspective of getting maximum drafts back. And that was the currency that he used. It was how many drafts do I get? And that was the way he did it as well, because you want gems. I am looking right now at my Arena. Oh my goodness. So I'm looking at my wild cards. I got a lot.
So you probably haven't been doing the thing.
I don't pay attention to any of that stuff. I just hit the button.
You're just like, if I need more gems, I'll just buy more gems.
I do buy more gems if I need them. I have packs though. I don't, like right now I have 47 Pioneer Masters packs. I have 351 Foundations packs.
There's a lot of Foundations
I should
packs.
Probably open those. But like, this is what I'm talking. I have 177 Duskmorn packs that I just never opened. Like, I'm just lazy.
Just don't be like Marshall, folks.
Yeah,
I just not the right approach.
I just don't want to sit here, like some like weird college experiment where it's like, how many times will he hit the button, right, opening up his packs or whatever. But I have 438 mythic wild cards. I have 933 rare. I have 2,154 uncommon, and I have 1,359 common. So that's where I end up, Jonathan. That sounds like a lot to me, but I don't actually know.
Yeah, that's significantly more than me. Might have like 40% more than I do in general. But that's because Arena came out while I worked at Wizards. And then once I started working at Wizards, I was just given an account with all the cards on it. And so I just played on that account for all my testing purposes. So I've only been accumulating wild cards over the past year, basically. And so with that, I have, whatever number of mythics and rares that I have. But yeah, I know that most people who draft, once a day or whatever, it's just going to add up. And the technically correct thing to do is, yes, if you have a surplus of rare and wild cards and you will never use it for constructed, or you just have so many it doesn't even matter, yeah, just craft all the rares and mythics. And then every time you take a rare, you get, 20 gems. And then every time you take a mythic, I think you get more gems off of a mythic, right? Yes. Yeah. And then you can just go about it that way if you just want to really go infinite. Although the true way to go infinite is just to have a really high win rate. Mm-hmm. But the win rate needs to be pretty significant, I think.
It's got to be pretty good. Yeah, Ryan had it. It depends on which format you play.
Like 60 something.
Yeah,
right?
It was in the high 60s if I remember correctly, mid to high. But I mean,
and that's really tough.
But you can. That's actually why Ryan's channel was called Going Optimal, was because he was actually not trying to hard sell going infinite. Right? Because what you're really trying to do is maximize, basically make it so that you can draft the most for the least money given your skill set. And, and he would show how to do the gold things and all that. You can re-roll some gold things. And I just can't, I don't know. I just don't, I've never been interested in that type of stuff.
Right.
I
totally get it though, because there are a lot of people who want to try to play Arena for as close to free to play as possible.
No,
right?
Yeah. Sorry. So, what I meant was with the gold part, farming the gold. Jay does it too. He knows all the things about maximizing your gold return.
Farming you mean re-rolling the 500s?
Re-rolling for it, or having another account and you hit these milestones that give you gold for free or whatever.
Oh yeah, I don't pay attention to the milestones at all. They happen when they happen.
That's what I'm saying.
I do look at the daily things because that's so easy. It's literally in front of your face. If I'm there's a 500, I'm just gonna click it once to see if I get a 750. Right. That's the only thing I'll do, and then I won't do anything. I'm not gonna play a constructed match and make a fake mono white deck to hit this gold because I just draft so much. I should hit these milestones anyways, and then that's kind of my approach. And then the next level is of course crafting all the rares and mythics, and that's totally fine if you have a bunch. If you want to become a gem drafter, I call it being a gem drafter, as quickly as possible, and that's also totally fine. But whatever you do, it's still going to be pretty hard. Only the top, what do you think, the top 2% of players can actually have a high 60% win rate. It's just it's very,
probably
very low.
More. I don't know. It's not that much. It's probably 5%.
I look at the leaderboards on 17 lands, and most people don't have a high 60% win rate. Okay. It's low to mid, but to get to 67, 68, that's a really good season for most most good players. Okay. Yeah. Then yeah, you're right. Yeah. My process with this type of stuff, I don't know why, it's just how I'm built. I've always wanted to do the fundamentally correct thing. In this case, that's try to win enough to make my gems last a long time so that when I do rebuy, it's not very often. But I never want to do all the little detail stuff. You know what I mean? It's that's a different game, Marshall. That's a different game. Yeah. One more question. We only have time for one more question here. This is from Mark, who says, "Hey guys, thanks for the podcast and for continuing to create limited content. I especially want to give a huge thanks to Paul for his YouTube videos, which I have found to be a huge help in leveling up my gameplay." Nice. I really appreciate how he always takes the time to explain his decision-making process and identify play lines, regardless of whether it's his first video in a format or his 50th. It's also been great to have Paul as a co-host while Luis has been away. And before he joined the show regularly, I was a big fan of his guest appearances. It's easy to tell you three are great friends and you naturally mesh well together, and the stories are hilarious. Which brings me to my question. Could you share anything about Paul's future on LR after Luis comes back? Would he become a permanent third co-host or a regular guest like Sirkovitz? We haven't talked about it yet,
most likely he'll be regular again. Like we were aiming to have Paul on 2 times per set cycle, kind of like an early check-in with us about what he's been up to early in the format, and then one down the line a little bit. And I mean, I don't know, we can talk to Paul about it, but my assumption is we'll probably go to that again. But I mean, honestly, Paul can come on the show as often as he wants. Like Paul has the green light at this point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like it'll be a few weeks at least until LSV still makes a return. So I'll still be here for a bit, and then anytime, you need to fill in, this is what I do. So it's not like I have to go out of my way to prepare for these just because I just draft every single day, multiple times. So that obviously helps a lot with being able to contribute. And then with the videos, honestly, the thing is, all those years in coverage really helped.
Yes.
Right. Because that is exactly what I do in coverage. And I just take that exact same approach of narrating the possible lines of play, except this time it's not Jean-Emmanuel Deprat doing, playing.
Right.
It's me. So I just go, okay, well, this is my hand.
Right.
And then just try to outline what seems like the best, what the options are. Cause everybody sees the options, but everybody won't necessarily take the correct option. Right. And then just explain why I make the decision that I do.
Yeah. I lied. One more question. So we have a question from Connor. We've only got 2 left total, so I figure we might as well close it out. Sure. Got a question from Connor. We're gonna answer that next week as our Patreon question of the week question because it's a little bit deeper. But Judah says, "Hello, this question is for Paul. What was the most egregious instance of you and or Luis choosing Magic over school when you guys were at UC Davis? Is there a specific time that stands out?"
Well, so I never actually went to UC Davis. By the time I went over to Davis, I was already just playing Magic for the most part. It was tough. I mean, this is, let's just say my family didn't necessarily approve of me deciding to play Magic and take this seriously. And so, I ended up ultimately moving out of my home and then moving in with Luis. And by that point, I was already full in on Magic. But when I was in college at the time in Los Angeles, I mean, there's just, it's like, I know I should be studying for a mid. It's just all kinds of stuff. Like I know I should be studying for a test. Yeah. Okay. To be fair, like when it was for finals, right? Like you'd buckle down and whatever, but there were certainly many instances where, I mean, I hope my kids don't see this, but I've definitely like skipped classes. Like that's been in my repertoire in the past. It's like I got to finish this draft, or I'm in a premiere event on Magic Online. I mean, I've done all the things that you would expect from somebody who just loves the game so much that it's basically all they do. So I am guilty of most things you can imagine and possibly more.
Wow. All right. We'll leave it at that. Thanks everybody for these questions. We really, really appreciate it. It's super fun to get a chance to dive into some, varied topics like this. And we really appreciate it. That is going to do it for the show this week. If you want to find us on social media, Marshall_LR and Paul's Humph, pretty much everywhere. Make sure you check out Paul's YouTube channel. Again, link in the description below for that. For the reasons that we stated, we want to say thank you to Ultimate Guard and to our patrons for supporting us as always. And you can find everything at lrcast.com that's related to the show. That's going to do it for this one. We'll see you next week. So I'm told, Paul, that producer Jeff has a sign off for us.
Yeah.
This week.
I have been told such things.
Jeff, what do you got for us?
I don't know if it's exactly a sign off so much as it is an additional question. You
want to have your own question.
We've already answered a bunch. Why not one final one for Jeff?
Yeah, exactly. Because you were complaining in the pre-show that, or I don't know if complaining is the right word. You were commenting, I guess, that there was a lower than usual number of food questions.
Would you say that I was on my soapbox being...
Absolutely, yeah, definitely on your soapbox about the quality or the lack of food questions. But
I was.
No, the food question that I wanted to throw out to you and Paul is that we often get questions about you guys what's your favorite thing, what do you like to cook, how do you cook this, that sort of thing. I want to come at it from the other side and think like what's your never again dish, like either a meal or something like that you never want to try again.
Paul, have you ever had like I know that you've spent some time in Korea. Was there anything over there that you were like, Like this isn't gonna fly.
Yes.
Like
yes,
maybe too spicy, or I don't know. You love spicy, but they go hard over there.
It was everything. So yeah, I had this soup, and it was.
I think I maybe remember this. Did you tell Luis and I about it?
I believe I did. I think it was, the name of it implied, I don't even remember the name of it, but it basically implied that it was a soup with this Korean dish called sundae, which is basically the Korean version of their blood sausage. It's filled with some noodles and rice, and it's got blood in it. I'm like, oh, I don't mind that. I'll eat that with the soup. And I got it spicy as well. Well, it was 10 out of 10 spicy for me. And I can usually handle my spice, but I literally couldn't finish the soup because it was too spicy. Not only that, the sundae wasn't the big part of the actual soup. It was literally just filled with entrails or what, like it was filled with just intestines, and even intestines. I can handle a couple of bites of intestine, but I mean, it was just a bowl of blood sausage and intestines. And for me, it's like, yes, I can handle it, but it was just too much.
But
like every bite was just a bite.
Oh, tripe and all that.
It was just a giant heaping bite of just blood and intestine with a soup base that was far too spicy for me to handle. And it was just not a good experience. I'm like, oh, spicy. I can handle, like when I go have pho, I don't mind ordering the special. Like I can handle some tendon, but when you get, the special from a pho place, it's like a little bit of tendon, a little bit of tripe. It's not too bad. It's not too offensive. This one, because it was in the heart of like a small Korean town. I mean, it was a small town. I mean, they just go all in, and that's just how the locals like it. Just the entire bowels of a cow just in a bowl. And I was just like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this spicy or just this bowl ever again. I got a little too adventurous. And what's funny is my dad and some of my mom's friends were there too, and they were loving it.
They didn't
get the super spicy, but they were just like, oh yes, more stomach, more tripe, more intestine. I'm just this too much. Never again.
Oh man. The one that I had that maybe it ruined it for me is I went for Ethiopian food. And I'm not really.
Oh no, you're bringing this up while Luis is not here.
Yeah, I am, because he always bashes me because he loves it. But man, and I also think I probably went to a place that wasn't top tier. So this is like a bad combo. It's like a food that I'm not really a huge fan of anyway, like textures wise and stuff. It doesn't really vibe. But then on top of it, it like wasn't. I don't think it was even a good version of it. Like you want to put your best foot forward when you're trying out a new food, and I don't think that I gave it the chance to do that, but no bueno.
You got like Ethiopian fast food, basically.
It was a restaurant. Like we sat on the ground and stuff, but it was like, it was just like this weird combination of all like textures and things that I just don't like across the board.
Like the spongy bread. Do you like the kind of the curry flavor? Are you not a big?
I do like curry flavor, and I had a cup. That was the one dish that I did like. There was also a dish there that was some type of raw thing, and it was ultra spicy. It was too spicy for me, but a friend of mine, he convinced the people to cook it for him in a way that they didn't want to. Like they were like, no. And he kind of thought that maybe he was getting the, you're not really Ethiopian treatment. But the reality was it was like
the full thing.
But that's not what was going on. They were just like, no, like this isn't going to be good.
That's too much.
And he made him do it anyway, and he couldn't hang.
You regretted it?
He did. Yeah. So anyway, that was it's going to be hard to get me to go pay money for Ethiopian food again after that experience.
That's totally. There is one other food that I always want to like, but I just don't get there. Okay.
What is it?
And that, because I love sushi, right? But the one thing.
Is it uni?
It's uni.
Can't do uni.
I want to like it because all the foodies love uni.
I want to be the cool guy that goes,
I want to be the guy that loves the creamy, buttery texture. All I taste is salt water and ocean.
Same.
And it's just, even if there's like a high quality thing, I can't get over that taste, even though it's kind of creamy, right? Like I don't mind, salmon eggs, right? Yeah. Those are okay. Yep. But uni is just, it's a little too much for me. So that's usually something I usually stay away from, even though I know it's like a luxurious, nice item that people like.
Same, dude.
Okay, I'm not alone.
No,
I'm not alone.
it's me and you.